Hello, everyone. Joshua Hatton here with Single Cask Nation, doing yet another tasting note for one of our whiskeys in the next retail release of Single Cask Nation. You may or may not have seen the review that I did for our Ruadh Mhor 8-year-old. That was posted last week. The other advanced sample that we got from this latest release is our, there we go, our 10-year-old Ruadh Mhor. Now you see it says M-H-O-R, and Scots Gaelic, that M and H together make a V sound, so it's Ruadh Mhor. This is a peated Highland whiskey that was distilled. We call it an undisclosed distillery. We weren't allowed to use the distillery name, unfortunately, on the label. But what I can tell you, though, it's a pretty large distillery in the Highlands. The vast majority of their whiskey goes into a very famous blend. So hopefully that last bit kind of gives you an idea of who might be who produced this spirit. And then there, of course, is our flavometer, so that gives you an idea of where the flavors are going to lie for this. So it is single cask, obviously, Single Cask Nation, and cask strength. One of the interesting things about this 10-year-old Ruadh Mhor and the 8-year-old Ruadh Mhor is that the ABV is actually the same. Both of them are bottled at 60.7% alcohol, and that is, of course, natural cask strength. Just unusual that both had the exact same ABV. The other thing that I wanted to point out about this whiskey as well is there's a bit of a debate online as to how this is spelled and pronounced. So some independent bottlers spell it just as we did here, and some independent bottlers spell the last word M-O-A-R, which would have the more sound instead of the vor sound. And if you do a little bit of digging, you'll find out that the distillery itself actually weighs in as to how it's spelled. And the distillery actually goes with M-O-A-R. But the broker that we got this cask from had it listed as M-H-O-R. So we went with what was on our paperwork. So there you go. So in case you're doing some searching and you find out two different spellings, there's the reason why. But enough of that about that. I want to actually taste this whiskey with everybody. Now this is from a second fill bourbon hogshead. It's tough to tell in this video here, right? Me looking at the video, it kind of looks like it's just a nice, good, bright golden yellow color, but in person, in real life, it actually has a slightly greenish tinge to it, like almost green flecked gold. So let me. So one thing I want to point out here is, those of you that are probably, veterans of peated whiskeys, most people's experience with peated whiskey tends to be whiskey, or single malt, I should say, tends to be peated single malt from Islay. Now, peated whiskey from Islay, as opposed to peated whiskey from the Highlands, they're two very different animals, and the reason why they're different is on Islay, they're using Islay peat to dry their barley or to smoke their barley, whereas in the Highlands, they're using Highland peat to impart that smoky flavor into the barley. And the fact of the matter is, the peat on the mainland of Scotland is quite different than the peat on Islay. And I mean, if you think about what peat is, it's just vegetation that has been decomposing over, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. You dig it up almost like a dirt, you dry it, and then use that as a heat source to dry the barley and to smoke the barley. But on Islay, you're dealing with crap weather all the time, you're dealing with salt in the air, salt everywhere, and different vegetation completely. So, the makeup of Islay peat is definitely going to be different than what's in the Highlands. Now, in the Highlands, you don't have that seaside air hitting everywhere. And also, in the mainland, you've got a lot of heather, a lot of floral, flowers and different types of plants that just make up what is that terroir. So when they peat the barley with Highland peat, you're not getting the seaside. You're not getting that iodine. You're not getting that sort of, low tide kind of notes coming in. For me, Highland peat is always more smoky, even floral smoky, and sometimes quite foody in a way. Like when I say foody, I mean barbecue sauce and smoked meats and smoked cheeses and things like that. So let's go into some of these notes here. And this is not too far from what I was suggesting before. Off the bat on the nose, it's pork rinds right up front, which you might be asking yourself, Joshua, aren't you Jewish and aren't you vegetarian? Well, yes, I am Jewish, I'm vegetarian, I don't eat pork rinds. I've never eaten a pork rind in my life. However, Jason has, when he wasn't a vegetarian, because he's also a vegetarian, so he knew what that was like, and I actually went out and smelled someone's pork rinds. There's a whole story to it. Don't get dirty, but there is a story to it. So I did go in here choosing pork rinds with some knowledge, with some nosing knowledge. Oh, wow. There is a salty component to it. It's almost like, salted, like steak fries or, pub chips for my friends overseas. It's farmyardy. There's like a good sort of like damp hay quality to this. Almost like a horse paddock kind of quality to it as well. And then some cinnamon, like a good burst of like almost big red gum. It was really lovely. Again, like the Ruadh Mhor at 60.7% alcohol, I'm putting my nose in here and it's not hurting my nose. There's a bit of sweetness in the back, but it's a heavy, spicy sweetness, almost like a sarsaparilla soda, or maybe like those root beer candies, those little like brown barrel hard candies that you get. It's really a lovely host of scents in there. All right, I'm gonna go in. First sip is going to be me just figuring out the texture, and then after that, then I'll be looking for flavor. Wow. So, in the Ruadh Mhor review, it was really a focus on how oily that spirit was, but there was this almost effervescent quality to it, this tingly nervousness to it. And I would say this has a very similar effervescent kind of quality to it, but it's not as oily as the Ruadh Mhor, but somehow it's kind of heavier in a way, fattier in a way. Like the Ruadh Mhor coated my tongue, right? Front, back, right, left, center, completely coated my tongue, where this is almost like that same type of oily quality, but it's not coating my tongue. It's just sort of rolling around in my tongue. If you can envision what mercury looks like, right? When mercury is moving around, it's that kind of rolling heaviness. And I'm getting that sensation on the palate, which is really, really nice. Okay. Massive hit of peat. There's no doubt about it. There's no escaping that. This is a heavily peated malt, by the way. This is peated to the tune of, say, 40 to 45 ppm. By comparison, Kilchoman and Ardbeg are both at around 50 ppm. Bowmore is 25 ppm. Port Charlotte would be 40 to 45, and so on. So this is in the range of a heavily peated malt. So you're going to get that. But there's stuff beyond the peat. Now I'm going to take another sip and see if I can pick out some of these notes. So think the earthiness of chipotle peppers without the spice of chipotle peppers, that just warm roasted earthiness coming through. Smoked almonds, like the Blue Diamond smoked almonds that you get right there. Fresh, yet maybe almost a bit overripe, golden delicious apples. Some smoked salt on there as well. The saltiness balancing out that apple sweetness coming through. Just really lovely. Back to that horse paddock as well. So we're starting to transition towards the finish. That farmyardiness kind of returns. I want to be really clear here. When we talk about all these notes like farmyard and chipotle, like earthiness, and these are just small bits that balance out one another. Sweet is going to balance out the salt, right? A richness is going to balance out a floral quality, and so on. So there's never one note that is dominating the other. It's really all in balance, and it's balanced quite nicely. Really proud of this pick. The more I sip it, the more enveloping the texture gets. It gets more oily. Before it was rolling around, and now it seems to really be coating the tongue. I think anytime you're tasting a whiskey, I think it's really good to not only look for flavors, but look for what's going on with the texture. And know that not only flavors build, but texture builds as well. And I think that's a really good thing to look for as you're exploring whiskeys. Now, that finish is just going on and on. Some of the notes that I was getting, I was back to that cinnamon that I got on the nose, that sort of big red gum going on there. And now this kind of like warm salted caramel with a bit more of that apple, kind of like a fall fair caramel covered apple kind of thing going on. This is just such a lovely whiskey, and it's from a distillery. Like I said, I can't really mention the name of the distillery, but it's from a distillery that I usually don't pay too much attention to, and to be honest, I don't know why I never have, but I only found out last year that they actually produced peated spirit, and then when we got the opportunity to buy a cask of their peated spirit, I said, yes, please, thank you, give us the sample. If that's good, we want to bottle it. And it was remarkable. This is a remarkable whiskey, and I'm really happy with it, very proud of it. So this is the Ruadh Mhor 10-year-old. This is going to hit the shelves. Suggested retail prices around $115, $120, somewhere around there. As I mentioned in the Altmore tasting of the 8-year-old, we worked very closely with our importers, Impex Beverages, to absorb as much of the 25% tariffs as we could. So Impex did their part, we did our part. We're both doing as much as we can. Our target as independent bottlers is we'd like to do, whenever possible, $10 per year had always seemed to be the right price to put a bottle of whiskey on the shelf. And, unfortunately with these 25% tariffs, even though we were able to absorb most of the tariffs, we weren't able to absorb all of the tariffs. So while I would love for this to be on a shelf for $100 or $105, it's going to be closer to $115 or $120. But just know that with the tariffs, like full fat tariffs, if we didn't absorb them, it'd be closer to $145 or $150. So So we're doing our best for you. Most importantly, we want to bottle really good whiskey that we're proud of. And this one, like our 8-year-old Altmore, we're really proud of, and we think it's really good, and we hope you enjoy it. I wish you the very best in these tough times. I'm looking forward to seeing you all when we make it on the other side of this whole COVID-19 business, and I wish you well. I wish you a happy, healthy time out there. Be well, everybody. Cheers.